Don't skip out just because you're injured. My husband's relatives were going to get together at his parents' house, and I was on my way to go shopping the day before to help out when I had an accident. When I woke up, I was on a hospital bed. My mother was peering into my face against the white ceiling with a tearful look on her face. I tried to get up, but I could not move my body at all. I was in terrible shape, with gauze and bandages all over my body. I had apparently slept for an entire day, and I had already had a day of relatives gathering. There were apparently a large number of incoming calls from my husband on my smartphone. I asked my mother to check the incoming call log and found that several answering machines had been left. However, their contents were not of my concern. Hey, where are you wandering around? Didn't I tell you we were having a family reunion? Get your ass over here! The yells echoed. He seemed quite angry that I wasn't there. A little while after I finished playing, I received another call from my husband. My mother answered. Hey, hello! You finally picked up. Where are you? My mother tells him I'm hurt, but he doesn't listen at all. She's hurt so bad I can't even touch my phone. That's why she can't go help you. She's on a ventilator. After hanging up the phone, my mother quietly and angrily left the hospital room and went somewhere. I am Jen, 30 years old. I live with my husband, Ken, who is 5 years older than me. We met when he worked for one of my business partners. I work for a relatively large company, and I was in charge of Ken in sales, which led to our frequent conversations whenever he came to the office. Jen, would you like to have dinner with me? Do you have a favorite food? There's a restaurant near here that I recommend. At first, I responded blandly and went through the motions. I wondered what it would be like to have such a relationship with an employee of a business partner. However, his enthusiasm overcame my patience, and it's about time you at least went out to dinner. My colleague had told me so, and I finally shook my head. And so he took me to a hideaway dining room. Since we both had work the next day, we both ordered soft drinks. Even without alcohol, however, the conversation with Ken was fast-paced. This is an artist I've been listening to a lot lately. I like this song too. On my days off, I spend most of my time at home reading books and watching movies. I understand, I am also an indoor person. By the way, my favorite movie is... We had so many interests in common that we talked without losing track of time. Until that day, he was just a business partner, nothing more, nothing less, but after that day, I had a completely different impression of him as a nice person to talk to. We went out for dinner several times after that. We had only been going out after work, but then he asked me, Jen, would you like to go see a movie with me sometime? And we decided to meet around noon on our day off. We were supposed to have lunch first, watch a movie, have tea, and break up that day, but when we left the cafe, Ken asked me if I wanted to go to the park. There he confessed his feelings for me. He was so enthusiastic in his approach to me that I had somehow fallen in love with him as well, and we ended up going out. After 2 years of dating, Ken proposed to me and we got married, and my family name was changed to Miyahara. My in-laws and my sister-in-law, Sarah, were very kind and immediately relieved my nervousness and anxiety. Sarah, in particular, has taken good care of me. Are you okay? If you need any help, just let me know. Every time we saw each other, she worried about me. I was sure she was a kind and caring person. I smiled at her and said, don't worry. Ken is kind too, and I am very happy every day, I told her. Then she had a complicated expression on her face, one of relief, but also one of confusion as her eyebrows lowered. The reason for this look would become clear a little later. We did not live together before we got married. We started living together after we were registered, and then Ken's behavior changed. He would say, hey, where's the food? Why isn't my shirt ironed? He began to show a kind of arrogant attitude toward his husband, saying things like, you make less money than me anyway, so you should take care of the housework for me. It's about Ken, how did he live when he lived alone? I had a chance to meet with Sarah alone, so I decided to ask her. If someone who knew nothing about it had asked her, she would have looked at me suspiciously and said, you were doing it yourself, weren't you? But it seemed that it had occurred to her. Even if she didn't say it out loud, the look on her face said, I knew it. In fact, Ken had a bit of a selfish disposition. Even when he was at home, he never helped out at all, saying, housework is for women. Even when he lived alone, he hired a housekeeper to do the housework. Sarah let out a big breath of exasperation. When we were dating, we only saw each other a few times a month, and we had never been to each other's homes before, so I had no idea. Here I finally understood why she worried about me so often. But I had a faint hope that he would surely change after the birth of our child. A little after we were married, I found out that I was pregnant. I rubbed her belly with new life and told her about it, and he was delighted. However, he never showed any sign of concern for me after that. He would tell me to do it without hesitation, even when I had to carry heavy things to clean up the mess. Eventually, morning sickness made me so nauseous that I could no longer move properly, so I had to quit my job. Then Ken started saying to me every day, "You don't even work during the day, and I'm the one who provides for you, so it's only natural that you do the housework, right?" He began to say, "You don't work during the day. I'm worried about my stomach when I'm cleaning the bathroom or doing housework that requires me to squat or stand, so I'd like you to take over." I asked him to do so, but he would not listen to me. The smell of food made me nauseous, and as the days when I could not cook increased, I asked her to buy some lunch and eat it, but she just kept yelling at me, "You want me to eat cold food?" He would yell at me and pull my arm to make me stand in the kitchen. "It's just for now. He will change when the baby is born." I believed that, and the day of the birth arrived. But he didn't change. He made me, who had just left the hospital, clean up the mess he made while he was in the hospital. I don't care if my son Alex cries and screams. He never had to hold him, change his diaper, or feed him milk. Whenever he cried at night, he always clicked his tongue before going to a different room. I was at my limit to do all the housework and childcare by myself, so I asked Sarah and my own mother for help. They both gladly accepted to help. My mother, of course, is used to it, as is Sarah, an older mother with children slightly older than I. Thanks to them, I, who was always sleep-deprived, was able to take naps and manage to get by. Ken's coming home time has been getting later and later since they started coming to help me. Sometimes he would say, "I have to entertain guests," and he would not come home. Sometimes he would come home late, but now it seems to be almost every day. I understand that he is in a certain position and has certain social obligations, but is it really necessary for him to go so many days in a row? I began to suspect that he was cheating on me. I didn't think so just because he came home late. He does not usually wear perfume, but when he comes home, he starts to smell softly and sweetly. And it was the same scent every time. It's because there is someone at work who is heavily perfumed. When I questioned him about it, he brushed it off. Not having seen the decisive scene, I could not press the question any further. Then one day, I was told that Ken's relatives would be gathering at his parents' house this coming weekend. He told me, "Of course you're going to be there. It's your duty as a wife to help out," and I had no choice but to go. It was difficult to help while taking care of my son. But it was doubtful that Ken, who had never participated in childcare before, would be able to take care of him during that time. Perhaps he saw through my thinking that I would have to ask my parents-in-law or Sarah to watch him. He said, "Oh, my sister can't come because her child is sick. You'll have to take care of little one yourself, won't you?" I was nailed to the wall. He was not interested in taking care of him. It seemed that he had never developed the awareness of being a parent. There were about 10 relatives who gathered at the party. It would take too much time to cook for that many people on the day of the party, so I decided to start preparing the day before. First, I left my son with my mother to go shopping and headed to the supermarket. I was walking for a while when a strong shock hit my body and I was lying on the ground. As it was getting dark in front of me, I fainted as I saw a white car driving by at a high speed. "Oh, Jen. Thank God, you're awake." When I came to, my mother was looking into my face against the white ceiling. Her eyes were moist and tears were threatening to spill over at any moment. I would have called out, "Mother," but no sound came out of my mouth. I tried to get up, but I could not move my body at all. Somehow I managed to move only my eyes to check my condition and found that my arms were wrapped in gauze and bandages. And an artificial respirator was attached to my mouth. The smell of alcohol from the disinfectant was wafting around me, though I could not detect it from my own body. So, I was rushed to the hospital after the accident. That shock was apparently caused by being run over. I was a little dazed from hitting my head on the ground, but I probably didn't lose my memory or anything. A doctor came to see me, probably called by my mother. "Jennifer, you've regained consciousness. Apparently, I had been asleep for a whole day, and the day of my relatives' gathering had already arrived. I guess my face showed my disbelief. My mother took the trouble to show me the date on the screen of her smartphone. I've been getting calls from Ken on your cell phone since this morning. Maybe he's worried about you. Apparently, the smartphone was not broken and was functioning properly. Unable to move my own arm, I asked my mother to check the incoming call history. She seemed to have left some voicemails, so she played them back for me. Hey, where are you wandering around? Didn't I tell you we were having a family reunion? What are you doing? Hey, get your ass over here. The yells echoed through the room. He seemed quite upset that I was not there. Just as I was thinking that it was a good thing I was in a private room because I would have been disturbed if others were there, I received another incoming call. Of course, it was from Ken. My mother answered for me. Hey, hello. You finally picked up. Where are you? His voice was so loud that even I could hear him clearly, even though I was not on speaker. It's the hospital. She's hurt. Huh? Today is the day my relatives get together, right? Don't skip it just because you're injured. My mother and I sounded a little alike. So he must have misunderstood me and yelled at me without even knowing it was my mother. Hey, Jen. Are you listening to me? Come here quickly. Ken, I'm Becky. I'm Jen's mother. Oh, mother-in-law. Why are you? He starts to panic when she tells him her name. He was very outgoing toward my mother and had never shown his husbandly side at all until now. Is Jen around? Please take over. As I told you before, my daughter is injured. She is so badly injured that she can't even touch her cell phone. I can't help her because she's on a ventilator. The doctor explained that I was in a dangerous condition due to the trauma from the accident. All I could see now was my arm, but I was sure that the parts of my body hidden by my bedding and clothes were also badly injured. I also hit my head, so there is a bandage wrapped around it. I can't check my face without a mirror, but there is a tingling pain, so I am sure I am injured in several places. I'm hooked up to a ventilator and is unable to talk, let alone move. After the hospital called me, I thought I called you too. I wonder why you didn't pick up the whole time. No, I was at work. All night? You didn't even notice the call at all? You must have been working very hard. When she said this, Ken fell silent. I am sure he came home in the morning, as usual, and that's when he finally realized that no one was home. Enough! He hung up the phone with a mumble, as if something was wrong. My mother put the smartphone down on the bed table. Her hands seemed to be shaking. Her eyes, which had been wet with tears earlier, were thirsty and burning with cold anger. Doctor, how's my daughter? Yes, she is calm now. She said in the lowest tone I have ever heard in her voice, I'm going to go say something, and went out somewhere. From this point on, my mother told me the rest of the story. His relatives were enjoying themselves without me, bringing in food and having a good time. Then my mother showed up. It seems that my mother and mother-in-law had exchanged contact information, and she explained the situation to them and asked them to open the front door. Since no one but my mother-in-law knew anything about it, they gave her a look, "What are you doing here?" Those who had never heard of my mother in the first place looked at the people around them as if puzzled as to who this person was. My daughter Jen had an accident yesterday, and she finally woke up just now, she said in front of all the relatives, and they all looked at Ken at once. They questioned him as to why he was enjoying himself here when his own wife was in such a difficult situation. He had not expected my mother to show up, so he had his mouth opened. Of course, I had contacted Ken as of yesterday, but he didn't pick up the phone once. When I pressed the phone earlier, he said, I was at work. Were you really at work all night? You told me before that your work has been quiet lately. I thought your workload shouldn't be such that you have to work overtime until that late. A relative who is close to Ken's age voiced this. Ken glared at the relative. He must have been frustrated and impatient because he said, Why are you saying this now? Ken, where were you really yesterday? My mother did not ask. That's really true. In fact, for some time I had been asking my mother if Ken was having an affair. At first he seemed incredulous, partly because of his outward appearance. But when I told him that he was coming home late and that there were traces of a woman in his life, his expression became more and more grim. That's suspicious. If Ken really was having an affair, what would you do? Divorce or rebuild? I was hesitant to part with my son because he was still young, but then I thought back to what we had been doing. Ken has never done any housework or childcare. He acts as if he does not recognize his child, and I wonder if he cannot be called a father. If that is the case, maybe it is okay to leave him. I want to divorce Ken. I don't want to be treated as a housekeeper anymore. There's no point in being with someone who doesn't care about Alex, about our family. My mother nodded emphatically at my words. Thus, we began to gather evidence of the affair. It all came together, and after being convinced of the affair, my mother asked Ken where he had been. A picture of him with the woman with whom he was having an affair, taken by a detective. I also had correspondence with the woman in his email folder on his home computer. I knew that he had been sneaking around doing something, perhaps thinking that a message app on his cell phone would be more likely to be discovered. There were messages like, "Thanks again for meeting with me today." And "When can I see you next?" And "When can I see you next?" There were messages confirming plans, and passionate words like "I love you" or "I'm crazy about you." My mother would proudly show the printed copies of these messages in front of my relatives. He also revealed that he had been disrespecting me and treating me like a housekeeper until now. Now you can't get away with this, can you? Ken's face turned pale and his fists clenched tightly, and all the relatives hurled accusations at him. How stupid. How dare you to cheat? Shame on you. At these words, Ken shrank more and more. But looking down all the time did not stop him from hearing words that were bad for him. My mother is going to get even. I'm going to ask you to divorce my daughter. At these words, he looked up vigorously, as if he had been played. Wait a minute. I didn't want a divorce. It was just a whim. Besides, just because your mother-in-law wants you to get a divorce, it's not Jen's own will. He leaned forward as if he might grab her. A relative held his shoulder. What are you doing now? Don't be disgusting. Let go of me. I'm not satisfied unless I hear it from Jen herself. He cheated on her, forced her to take care of the housework, and deserved a divorce. My mother looked at Ken, who was out of control, coldly and put a piece of paper in front of him. It was a divorce papers with my signature on it. Yes, the man is right. Ken's behavior is terrible. I will never forgive you for hurting my precious daughter. At the look in her eyes, Ken froze. As you can see from the letter, it is Jen's own will that she wants to divorce you. She has been discussing it with me for a long time. Oh, no. While he was being restrained by relatives, my mother left the place. Then she returned to my hospital room. I looked at her anxiously, wondering what had happened, but she told me that everything was all right and told me what had happened. Later, the divorce was finalized. I didn't want to have anything to do with him anymore, and since I was too injured to move in the first place, I left it in the hands of my lawyer. I made sure to ask for child support, as well as alimony for the affair. And as it turned out during the investigation, the cheating partner was a person I knew named Emily. I would, of course, have the cheating partner, Emily, pay as well. Emily was a receptionist at a client company that Ken frequented. Incidentally, it was a different company from the one I worked for. While she was dealing with his visits to that company, she fell in love with him. The two exchanged contact information, developed a rapport through messages, and then secretly met outside the company. She thought that Ken's secrecy when they met was due to feelings of embarrassment or shyness. She did not know that he was married. One day, when Emily found out that Ken was married, she became angry and hateful toward me. As long as I am around, he cannot date openly. She cannot get married someday. Then let's erase it. She came up with such a horrible idea. She ambushed me in her car as I was coming out of the house, and when I think back about Emily, I feel angry and wonder why I had to go through this. Naturally, I am going to charge Emily plenty of alimony. Well, it doesn't stop there. I later heard that her anger did not stop with just hurling her anger at me. To my surprise, she stormed into Ken's company. She screamed his name and broke several pieces of equipment in her rampage. She was somehow subdued and taken away by the police officers who arrived at the scene as a result of the call. She would be severely punished, along with the fact that she had harmed me. Since she revealed to me that she had been having an affair, along with Ken's name, it became known within the company. Furthermore, she was fired when it was discovered that she had made several false business trips in order to have an affair. Ken no longer had a place to rely on. His relatives had disowned him. Since that gathering, he has lost contact with the in-laws as well as his relatives. He is currently missing. Even after the divorce was finalized, my parents-in-law and Sarah came to visit me. They were very kind to me, so I am a little relieved that they have not severed relations with me. I am so sorry. We just raised him to be that way. I'm really sorry, too. If only I had been more careful. He was the one to blame, so please don't apologize. I shook my head slowly, still unable to speak, to tell them this. The guilt still lingers in them, and I may only be able to smile awkwardly, but I hope we will be able to see each other again, smiling sincerely. Sarah and I intend to continue interacting with each other as friends. After that, I recovered well and was able to leave the hospital. I returned home to live with my parents and Alex. I would like to continue to live with all of them, while enjoying the happiness of watching my favorite son grow up with my favorite family.